We're here to talk about Glynn County zoning and the new ordinance. We're here to talk about how to give public comment on that, and the kind of functionality that we have and the support that OHM can offer for that. So we can go to the next slide. So our agenda today is kind of broken down into some big pieces, getting to know OHM a little bit, introducing myself and Kat, giving our fancy titles, basically walking through the development of the zoning ordinance and kind of the timeline for how that happened, talking about some suggestions that we might have if we were giving comment as an individual or a resident. Kat is both of those things. She's a resident, she's a employee here, and so she's going to give comment as well. So she can guide you through that a little bit. And we're going to also talk about, from an advocate eye view, what giving comment at a public hearing looks like and feels like, and kind of the technical things that might throw people off that are a little bit different because it's kind of a formal process. We're going to talk about some best practices, how to message things, and then walk through a worksheet. That's going to be the main workshop portion, is walking through a way to kind of form up that 3-minute comment that have the ability to give at the March 18th upcoming meeting. And then we have an action alert fillable comment web tool on our website that we'll walk through as well, that kind of highlights some of our concerns, and allows you to personalize for your experience. And then we'll end with some Q&A. But like I said, if you use that hand raise function, if we say something that doesn't make sense, we'll see that and we can answer those questions in real time. So feel free to raise your hand if you have a question while we're presenting. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Kat. She is our South Coast advocate here at OHM. She is a fireball. Kat just gets things done. And she is very, very passionate about the coast. And we're so excited to have her. Are you our newest employee, Kat? Our second newest employee? Second newest employee. So, but she has a lot of experience in advocacy and is a great representation of a Glynn County resident, right? Awesome. And then I think it's me next, right? Yeah, that's me. And that's me with a bird on my head. Love that picture. So I'm Eric Swanson. I'm the Advocacy Education Coordinator. So I teach people about how to be advocates for their coast, things they're passionate about. I teach them how to engage on issues that matter to them. And I do this through kind of teaching people kind of our best practices that we've learned as an organization through our 13 years of existence. And so to give a little bit of background on 100 Miles, many of you are here because you know us very well, but we're a staff of 17. We have a very committed board of directors. OHM works to help people interface with issues that are happening on the coast. These critical issues are for both residents and visitors because they affect everyone, and we help them to take action. And that's a big part of kind of my job is leveraging that passion towards action and teaching people how to take action for themselves. We say we wear lots of hats here. So we're advocates, organizers, educators, community planners. We're naturalists, we're strategists, and we're conservationists. As a bottom line, I think that hits everyone in our org. We would all label ourselves that way. And then I think, just slapping up here, this is our mission, right? It's a bold vision. It's a thing we want to hold ourselves. We say we protect the 100 miles of the Georgia coast forever, So we want to protect those things. We want to think about the people that live there, the landscapes that they live in, and the wildlife that shares those places with them. So that's what a zoning ordinance can do, actually. It can actually think of all of those things as connected and represent them all well. And so we're here to talk about how to give your comment on and put your ideas out in the world about how you can represent kind of our vision, but also your desire and your want for your county that you live in. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kat, who is kind of been enmeshed in this, and so has a lot of the minutia, and she's going to take over and walk you through the rewrite process.
Okay, thank you, Eric. That was a really good overview. And thanks, y'all, for joining us during this lunchtime on Friday the 13th. Like Eric said, we're here to kind of help you figure out how to comment on the zoning rewrite process that's been happening in Glynn County. But, the tools you learned today can be used when there's any time that you can give a comment. But for today's purpose, we're just going to go over briefly kind of what's going on with this process. Glynn County has been looking at rewriting their zoning code since 2018. So that is quite a long time. But it's a really big undertaking to do so, considering how our zoning codes affect almost every aspect of our lives in the county. I have some listed here that you can see on the screen. But zoning codes, they really, just kind of are our guide to how things are built in the county, where things can be built. They say things like how tall can our buildings be? How many trees should we expect to have on a lot? They could even get more specific to like what can buildings even look like. They could even say you have to have certain white trim. They could really say anything. That's kind of the key I want you to hear with the zoning codes. It's up to the county to decide how strict or not strict they would like their codes to be, to decide what's allowed and what is not allowed. So again, here's just some ways that zoning affects our lives. So it determines, what is the character of the space we're in. It can help determine how valuable our spaces are considered in terms of real dollars. It affects how our natural landscapes look, conservation areas, traffic density, bunch of stuff. Oop, I forgot I have to physically click. There we go. And because it is so intricate and in all of the things that the codes go into, that means that the details are very important. They say the devil's in the details. Yes, it is. And the right details in our zoning codes can provide a clear roadmap for everyone in our community to follow. That's the idea behind zoning codes. It provides rules that we all follow, and we know what the final product of those rules will be. So we're excited that Glynn County has been going through this process because having outdated code means that we're going to have outdated practices when folks are, growing, when we're building our county up. And some of these codes haven't been changed since the 1980s. So we really are excited that they are going to revisit them. But in a perfect world, the codes would reflect what everyone in the community values. So some things I can say I value in where I live is being able to walk around. So having sidewalks, being able to safely ride a bike. So maybe providing some bike lanes. I love seeing trees. I love green space. I love to be able to drive and it makes sense where the roads are going. All those things are determined by our zoning codes. And in this very ongoing process, there have been three drafts released since just last November, with the third draft being released yesterday afternoon at 3 p.m. So you can even see, we had this presentation all set to go for y'all. And then we said, oh my gosh, there are even more changes, which is a good thing because it means that, people are being heard. People's suggestions in this process are being listened to and incorporated. But we are concerned that there are still some adjustments needed to reflect the things that we have heard people ask for in these meetings, like preserving our rural spaces, protecting our trees, making sure that our resources are being used appropriately. So there are small changes that we would still like to have made that will have a big impact on our communities, on our wildlife and landscapes, and on our resources and our infrastructure. So we wanted to give you kind of an example of how we would take, something that you care about and how you can make that make sense in terms of zoning. So we're going to use the example of the tree ordinance. As I said, I do care about trees. So, as someone who lives here, I would want to see the trees protected. So if I'm coming to the commissioners and saying, okay, I really care about the trees in Glynn County, let me go into the zoning codes to see how the zoning codes are protecting or not protecting our trees. So on this slide, I'm showing a kind of technical way to dive into the zoning codes to figure that out. So when we looked at the codes, our concerns for the section that I'm so sorry, I forgot to add it, if you can see. So fast-paced environment here. But in the section of the ordinance that is for the tree ordinance, they have reduced it to 8 trees per acre from 12 trees. There's no open soil requirement that has been set aside explicitly for the protection of trees and the preservation of larger trees. Large trees need large open space for all their roots. And there's still no tree protection ordinance that applies to all of Glynn County. Right now, it's only for St. Simon's. But I will say, I don't think trees stop being valuable and beautiful at the end of the causeway, right? So getting technical in our suggestions, we are in our comments, we're using, numbers. We're saying instead of 8, you need to go back to 12, which is what it is right now. The current ordinance was created with a group of folks. And so we're not sure why it's being changed, but that's going to go off on a different tangent. So I won't go there yet right now. But we're asking them to just, yeah, keep it the number that it is now. We're asking them to reinstate the 25% open soil that is, again, required right now. And we're asking to expand it to apply to all of Glynn County. So again, being very technical, using specific numbers, we have heard at these meetings that that is what the planning staff would prefer so that they can go into the code themselves and say, okay, section 3 point whatever, we're going to change this, change that. So that's one way you could go about it. But you might say, Kat, I am a normal person. I'm not a tree expert. I'm just a tree enthusiast. So, how am I supposed to know the technical things to get the results that I'm seeking, which in this case would be more protections for trees in Glynn County? In your comment, you can cut through that noise because, yeah, the newest draft of the codes were released yesterday. And it's a lot to expect just a normal person to dive that deeply and have a, expert level comment ready in less than a week. So your comment can also be questions that you give back to the people who are there to, guide you through this process. And you can serve it back to them, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So your question, instead of all of those numbers, it could clearly say, I care about our tree canopy. How does this latest draft protect and prioritize trees in Glynn County? So you can serve it back to them so that the planning staff can explain it to you because you're not expected to be the expert at the meetings. So that was just, again, one example of the ways that you can go about shaping your comments. So I want to kind of bring us to the meeting itself. I have been to a lot of these meetings, and if you haven't before, it can be, it's a really different kind of space that you're entering. And the public hearing that we are talking about, the next one is going to be March 18th. So that's next Wednesday at 6 p.m. It's at the public library in downtown Brunswick. That's on Gloucester Street. And that is when the Mainland Planning Commission and the Island Planning Commission are going to come together to discuss the latest ordinance draft. And then they will either, say that they accept it and they're going to send it up to the Board of County Commissioners, or they're going to pause and say we need to work on it. But this is the next stop on the road to zoning codes. How the meetings go down is the folks who are on the boards will sit at a table, kind of similar to the one that you see right now, and you will be talking to them. And, sometimes I have felt like a fish out of water, or as you can see here, a sponge out of water, when I'm standing up and I'm talking to all of these really, important people that have sway with the county. But what I want y'all to remember is they are just people. They are members of Glynn County, just like you are, and you have the right to ask questions and to make suggestions that you think should be considered. And just for a kind of background, also, the meetings have typically gone in the order that, everybody is seated. The planning staff has gone over some of the changes, and then that's when they open up the floor to public comment. So that's showtime. That's when we go up and we get to say what we would like to say. After the public comment, the board will discuss their points and they'll address or not address the comments that they heard during the public hearing portion. One thing I did want to tell everyone is at previous meetings, when folks have gone up during the public comment time, people do have a lot of questions. And during their allotted time, they ask a question and they're waiting for someone on the planning staff or the boards to answer. But then they won't answer because they're saying, it's not time to answer questions. We're just hearing you. So I want to kind of cut through that possible tension that could happen. It's not that they're doing that to say, oh, we don't want to answer your question. It's because they want to make sure that you are given all of the time to say what you need to say. Because these comments are usually only allowed to be 3 to 5 minutes per person. So that's why. It's just to make sure that you have all of the time that you need to say what you need to say. But what you can say, is if you do have a question, make it really clear in your comment that you would like your questions answered by the board during their discussion that follows the public hearing portion. I think that would be a really effective way to, again, toss it back to them and say, I do have these questions. Please don't just ignore them, but please address them when when the floor is open for them to speak, if that makes sense. So yeah, just wanted to give a little overview of what it's like being in the space. And yeah, it can just feel a little daunting when you have folks seated at a table and you feel, that you're on the outside and you're talking to them. But yeah, they're just people, they're here to help you. So just keep that in mind when you are making your comment. So that's what I brought to the table to talk about today. And Eric is going to get into really the nitty-gritty of how to make a great comment. So take it away, Eric.
Pat, can
Thank
I ask a
you.
quick question or
Yes,
leave
you
a
Yes, of
can.
question
course,
at
Anne.
the end?
Yeah.
Oh, so I really like that idea because I think all of the meetings that we've all been to, we've never received a response other than thank you for your questions. So what is the best strategy? You think we can get an answer on the night of the 18th about these specific questions?
I mean, I would think that just making a point during your public comment to say that, to say, I really want to know the answer to this question. If you could please address it during the time. Because that's what I had observed, because you've been at those meetings too, is yeah, that
Yeah,
folks have questions and they just kind of say, hey, we're not here to answer questions right now because we want you to speak. So that's totally fine. That's how the process works. We get that. But yeah, I want to make it clear to them, well, you need to answer my question. I didn't just ask it to ask it. So
right.
that's just a strategy that I would think would be really helpful for folks making public comment, is to understand that your question might not get answered immediately. It's not a back and forth, because that's just not how it's set up to be. So I would really like to see what happens when people ask point blank, answer my question, please, when you are discussing after the public hearing. So, kind
Okay.
of using the rules to our advantage.
Okay, so if I asked the question, why, on the tree ordinance specifically, why was this changed? Is that a relevant question?
Yes.
Why the 25% no longer? Why it doesn't um, cover Glynn County? Why 8 trees instead of 12? Someone explain this to me, and I'm not going to be facetious, but like I'm a 5-year-old.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair because what I've also been seeing and what I've heard from other folks is that, yeah, they don't understand why these choices are being made. Or
right.
sometimes they'll give an explanation, like one example with the tree ordinance specifically is they've said, oh, well, because we put, the open soil limit in a different section, it's still going to be the same. But not really, because you're not saying the open soil is for trees, right? So you need to explain to me, how are the trees still being protected without it in that ordinance?
Okay, maybe we can talk about this offline because that's what Robert Ussery told me, and I didn't have any idea what he was talking about. So
Okay.
that 25% needs to be put specifically into the tree ordinance, is what I hear you saying.
Yes.
Okay, I'll work with you on that. Thank you.
A great question.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Anne, is they should have an answer for you in their back pocket. They should be able to say, we heard from 30 people that said that
Right.
they care more about the economic vitality of the county, and that means growth, and trees disrupt the ability to bring developers onto these properties. And I mean, that's something that they need to be backing up the changes based on feedback that they've received from the community.
Okay.
And if it's coming from an individual or an entity instead of the populace, they need to say those things. Um, and it is, an uncomfortable thing sometimes because they don't want to say why it was changed, but we have to know. I mean, we deserve to know.
Yeah.
Um,
So-
And just
Okay, thank you.
real quick, I will say, since this isn't the final hearing, it would be good to know if you tried to get the answer to these questions and the, planning staff or the planning boards couldn't give you that answer. Then that's when the county commissioners, they're the ones who are going to make the final choice, right? So it will be on them. And you could say, I still haven't had this explained to me when we get to that last public hearing. So that's why I think it would be a good tactic to really just, yeah, lay out all your questions, because that's what these meetings are supposed to have been for and what they're supposed to do as your planning staff. They're supposed to explain the changes.
And the IPC of the island and the MPC will be there, and county commissioners will be there as well on Wednesday?
They may or may not be there. On Wednesday, it's just between the planning commission, so
Okay,
island planning and mainland planning.
thank
But
you.
sometimes the county folks, will come out just to see what happens.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm. And just a little quick note, if there are more than three commissioners in a space, it's called a quorum. So all of that stuff would be a public record. And yeah, you would be able to talk to your county commissioners then as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome. So I'll get back to the kind of best practices for interacting with commissioners. This works for any individual that's in a position of authority or that you are kind of thinking of having a respectful conversation with. So we always want to be courteous. That happens to be kind of in our culture tied to titles. So you would want to address them as commissioners. You'd want to use their proper title. It is important for you to have a tone that allows you to get your message out there without them shutting off their brains. We've learned a lot through neuroscience that if you approach someone with that kind of courteous, calm demeanor, they actually are more likely to listen to you.
Mhm.
So be courteous, even though it can sometimes be hard. Um, be clear. So being clear means knowing your messaging ahead of time and kind of workshopping how you can be the most clear of what you want. We've been talking a lot about bottom lining things at OHM. So what's your individual thing that you want to talk about? Maybe there's one or two points you want to make, but you know yourself really well, and I know myself. And Kat has said in our meetings up to this presentation, we're talkers, we're gabbers, So sometimes we have to really work with the structure, and we'll talk about that structure in just a second. But that helps you be clear and it helps you be concise. So time bound things you want to talk about. I want to talk about this for 30 seconds. I want to talk about this for 45 seconds. And then when you practice that, you can give a really good comment that is concise and focused, but it's also giving clear messaging of what you want, your desires. And then when we talk about being complete, we talk about thinking about those 3 minutes and stating your beginning, your middle, and your end as three separate kind of individual parts. Your beginning is introducing yourself and your tie to the county. Your middle is talking about your concerns, and your end is talking about everything you just said. So it's restating it in the simplest terms, and then giving a thank you. And a thank you because it is, their time that they're giving, and we have to be respectful of that time. So above all, remember that commissioners are community members too. They live in this place as well, so they inherently should be caring about it. They might have different priorities, but we kind of meet in this planning space about these ordinances, about the zoning, so that we can have a good community to live in. And that's a thing we should hold everyone to as a resident. Go to the next one. So this is kind of the time to get out your pen and paper, or to be typing in your notes app on your phone. We can also drop a link to the PDF in the chat, and I can do that in just a second. But it will also be in a follow-up email. So we will get you all those resources and clickable, fillable links for everything we've talked about today, including this presentation. We won't have the official recording. That'll be packaged and get gotten out later. But as soon as this is done, I'm going to send a follow-up email to everyone with this comment guidance sheet. But basically, it just talks about what I just said. It talks about how you give an introduction. Hello, my name is Eric Swanson. I live in Glynn County. You can say your neighborhood. You can say the street you live on. You can say you're here as a resident, but you can say you're here as someone that's raised 3 generations of your family here. You can say that you're a doctor that resides in and practices in Glynn County. You can say that you're a fisherman. It doesn't really matter what this line specifically pertains to in regard to your title or your how you identify yourself. What it matters is tying it to the place that you live. And then you say thank you right at the beginning for the thing that you're going to talk about. And the thing you're going to talk about is the Glynn County zoning ordinance. In this position piece, you're going to state your position, and it's very brief. Remember, this is 3 minutes, so it goes fast. 3 minutes is not a lot of time, 180 seconds, right? So we have to think about, for your position, I'm here to express my support, opposition, concerns, recommendations. All those little words work really, really well for defining that keyword that they need to listen to. I'm supportive of this. I'm in opposition to this. It frames what your ask is before you even start to talk about it. Regarding trees, regarding open space, regarding bike lanes. So what I want to also advise you is during these 3 minutes when you're writing this position, you can't talk about every single thing that you are concerned about. We have a different tool for that, but during a 3-minute comment, you probably can't talk about every single thing that you want in the Glynn County zoning ordinance. It's just not enough time. So what we would advise you is that if you care about something kind of that bubbles to the top, you talk about that thing or maybe one other thing, and that's your focus. And then you use those other tools to talk about all of the ways that you think the Glynn County zoning ordinance will affect your life. We can also broaden this, right? You can talk about I statements a lot. You can talk about you as an individual and how it affects you. You can also think about broadly, you are part of the community. So it affects my community's health. It affects our future as a county. It affects our environment, these shared things, these resources that we hold in common. These statements of positions are key. They're like the bread and butter of your argument. So you have to be really clear and really concise on these. Let's go to the next one, Kat. So supporting points, support those key statements that we've talked about, that bread and butter in the middle. And it is really, really important that you, in this section, think about if you were going to be interviewed or if you were going to be, writing an article in the paper or an op-ed, what do you want to be quoted as saying? What do you want to be giving context to the issue? So this ties it to your actual lived experience. It gives you the point of view of like Kat mentioned earlier, I walk day after day after day in Glynn County. It would be a shame to see a new development made, and instead of having a diverse and beautiful tree canopy, we have less trees because of the laws that were put in place in this zoning ordinance. So those things tie it directly back to your individual experience. You can also use really good sources here. So this is where we like to say, find the data that's out there, and a data source that you might have specifically about trees is saying that according to National Arbor Day Foundation, the more tree canopy in a residential neighborhood, the healthier people are. The more likely they are to have less, long-term diseases. The more likely they are to have higher home values. The more likely are they have to have pride in place. All that data is out there, and it just takes a little bit of sleuthing. And we as experts kind of environmental issues have a lot of background in that and can always help you find that data to support and tie it back to maybe a resource that they respect or a big name that might be out there in the world, like Arbor Day Foundation, or even a local place that is, doing the research. University of Georgia says this. Those are important things that are respected and held in high regard. And then you can add a second supporting point. What I always say is that this can't cut or add additional time. So you can add, you know, National Arbor Day Foundation says this, and then you can say the Savannah Tree Foundation has found in Chatham County, a nearby county, that this tree ordinance that they had led to a really good retention of residents in their neighborhoods. That's a huge thing. That's another data point, but it can't add into that 1.5 minutes. It can't add time. It just has to stay within that 1 to 1.5. So that's why it says no time next to it. And then the next in minutes. Go to next slide, Kat. Yeah, there we go. And so we're going to do your conclusion. So this is your call for action. You're going to say, I urge you as a commissioner to try to represent the thoughts and the questions that you've heard here tonight. Answer those questions to us this evening, or at least figure out a process by which we can interface with you on these questions that we've had. And this is where what I like to do is think about that other tool that we have. So we have a tool to send emails to your county commissioners asking questions. And if I ask these questions before the March 18th meeting and I don't hear back from them, and I haven't heard back from them, I can ask these questions now. And I can state that I've been emailing and I've been asking clear questions and I haven't heard back about why these things have been happening, how these decisions are being made, what parts of the engagement process are receiving prioritization. So those are all points that in that conclusion, let's bounce back. Yeah, no, you're good. There we go. Awesome. I made Kat do something she didn't expect to do. Sorry. But again, we can say we have a chance right here to protect our environment, to ensure fairness, to invest in the future. These are forward-facing ways of framing it, right? We're thinking about the future. We're happy that you're working with us in this process, but we want to make sure that everyone's voices are represented. So thank again for the time, for listening to public input. And it's an important matter because it does kind of shape the way the county looks and feels in the future too. So that's a breakdown on some guidance on that 3-minute comment. Again, we can workshop things if you have specific ideas that you want to drop in the comments or come off mute when we get to the Q&A. We can go back to this comment guidance and kind of walk through how we would workshop exactly what to say and provide guidance to you on those best practices. Exactly. We're a good brain trust here. Got lots of cool people in the rooms that are experts. Okay, let's go to the next one. So I mentioned the other way to take action, right? So this is a way to take action that's on our website. You can scan the QR code right now if you want to follow along on your phone. But we're going to walk through kind of how to comment on the draft using an email function that we kind of have set up. We call these action alerts, right? It's ways for you to take action on the draft by sending an email directly to commissioners. We've pre-filled out some of our concerns, but this is important to note. This is like highly editable and highly personalizable document. So Kat just clicked through. This is what it looks like if you click to make a comment, and you have this scrollable thing. It has all of your information because you fill in your personal information about your location. So it ties it to where you're commenting from. We use our office because our office is right down there in Glen, in Brunswick. So we are able then to create our comment as kind of a form letter, so to speak, from our concerns as an organization, which many people share. So yeah, Kat's showing you the breakdown on you fill your name in first, last, you put an email, you tell your address, and then that'll actually all show up within the letter. And so it starts off with Dear Commissioners. It thanks them for the opportunity. It looks very similar to this 3-minute comment guidance, but it goes more in depth on the things that we're really concerned about. Beachfront lighting being one of them. Data center ordinance, which changed in the newest draft, so we may need to update language, right? And then if you go down, forest agriculture land, so FA land, and why that's important for our rural Glen. Conservation preservation and what that looks like. So all of these have very clear asks and very clear requests coming from our organization and kind of our guidance around these specific issues. But what you can do, which is really cool, is you can just delete all this. You can just go in and highlight it and delete it. When you do that, you can write your concerns in, or you can keep some of your concerns as in line with what we believe too. As an organization, we think that we have a really good idea from listening to residents, from thinking about past issues that have come up in Glen, and we didn't have the ordinance to back some of the community's desires. We didn't have those rules in place. So let's get those rules out on the books, right? Let's protect what we have here rather than playing catch up, being proactive than reactive. So this is where you can do that. You can really kind of drill down on every single little component that you care about and that you want to interface with. And you can also give all of the suggestions that you have or questions that you have in this document, and it will go to all the commissioners, both the island and the planning commissioners as well. So what I want to give, time for is to kind of workshop your concerns and your comments. I also want to answer any questions you might have about anything we've said so far. So we'll kind of go through the end of the presentation. I know there's been some good comments in the chat. And then if people want to come off mute as well, here's an invitation to stay up to date. We release these alerts and we send directed emails for things that people care about. It is a way for you to be up to date. Many of you are probably signed up already, but we always like to invite people to follow us on social media. Sometimes that's the quickest way to get information out and be responsive to 3 o'clock changes on a Thursday, the weekend before they're having a meeting. So really important that we want everyone to be on the same page, and social media sometimes acts as the best resource in that regard. And then the next one, because sometimes we can be a little dreary when we talk about these things. We can get a little down because it does seem like we're not empowered. But Margaret Mead reminds us that we should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So we applaud you for being here. We applaud you for coming into the space, and we really do appreciate your presence at the meeting on the 18th if you can make it, or sending those emails in because your voice deserves to be heard about the future of Glenn. And there's, I think, just a Q&A slide, so we can go forward or backward in the presentation as much as we need to. If anyone has questions or wants to come off mute, feel free to, or if you are hesitant to talk, feel free to drop questions in the chat, please.
Hey guys, so how is the meeting going to go as far as 100 miles? Are you guys going to tackle certain things that night? Do you already have an agenda set up to talk about beachfront lighting? Is Catherine going to be there to do that? Tell me how OHM is going to address these things, and then how can we support you or fill in um, with other things like ADUs, or I want to emphasize trees, but I also want to emphasize density, 4,000 square foot lots, and ADUs not counting as densities. That's really pivotal to me, and I don't think a lot of people are thinking about that. I could be wrong.
Yeah. So our comments, and also thanks for your question, Anne. Our comments are definitely a little more focused on land use versus the density. But that's something, I mean, yeah, the density is something to note that it went down to technically it would be a higher density. It's
Hi.
4,000 square foot from 6,000 square feet. So the topics that OHM is going to talk about are really the ones that are still on our website. We just have to
Okay.
look and, see what possibly changed from the last draft to this draft. But we're going to be talking about the lighting. I do know
Hmm.
that the Sea Turtle project will be, the St. Simon's Island Sea Turtle project folks will be there to talk about the lighting. We're also going to be talking about the new data center ordinance that has been included that hasn't really been talked about by a lot of folks.
Hmm.
So we're really hoping to get some clarity on that addition, and then talking about the land uses allowed in our rural spaces. So something that I have also just kind of noticed in the whole ordinance is that seems to be kind of like a dissonance in the intent of what we would want, but then the rules would make that not possible to happen, right? So we're hearing that people care about, preserving the rural character of West Glen, of, keeping the density low, but in forest agriculture land, um, the allowed density is 2 units per acre, which is lower density than, like a townhome area or something. But if you think about the intent of the rural district is to keep open space, have large lots. 2 units per acre, Weyerhaeuser owns so many parcels of land. If they wanted to sell and turn one of their 1,000 acre parcel into housing, that would make 2,000 homes.
Hmm.
That's not very rural, when a lot of places out there now are as small as there's only maybe like 100 homes on a whole stretch of land, right? So that's what our kind of technical concerns are diving into is we've heard people expressing that they really value this, but we're not seeing the code protecting that value. Same goes for the conservation preservation land. That is a district that is supposed to be set aside for land to stay as green space. Maybe, it's marshland, it's land that you shouldn't build on, is what conservation preservation is, right? Well, in our zoning code, we would be allowed to build a police station on conservation preservation or a wastewater treatment plant on conservation land. And that's not the intent of conservation, right? So in a lot of instances in our codes, that's what we're seeing. So I think, and part of the meeting, more people speaking out. And again, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know the technicalities of, well, what density would make it a rural space. That's for the planning people to figure out. What
Hmm.
I would love to hear residents is just saying concisely what they want and asking Glenn County to explain to them how that's being protected and how that's being valued over other things that are being considered valuable right now. Like we kind of said earlier in our talk that a zoning code would, it should reflect what your values are. And from at least the previous one, I can't really speak for the one that dropped yesterday because it's been so busy, but I would say that Glenn County really values asphalt and they really value rooftops.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's like, great. I mean, yeah, we do need asphalt, but I also love to have trees to park my car under because
Mm-hmm.
it gets really hot. So just, so I would love to see people show up to the meetings and just, yeah, just say what you love about your county and say why you want to protect it. That kind of thing. Was that helpful?
Yes, it was very helpful. I'm going to workshop some stuff. I mean, I wrote a letter to the editor about the trees, and I may just say that too, but I want to find a way to talk about density, specifically 4,000 square foot lots, and specifically call out the ADUs not being counted in density. I think that's a real bait and switch, and I need to find a better way to articulate that doesn't put them on the defensive, and I'm not sure how to do that.
Well, we can definitely talk about that too, but if this is a helpful conversation for
Yes.
everyone, we could, like, Eric said, we could try to go over some examples if we have time.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I
Thank you.
think the ADU stuff is very important. And for those of you who don't know, ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. That means basically a unit that's built on a property, private property, that is a dwelling unit, but it is separate from the square footage of the home that you dwell in. Those are oftentimes very regulated because they are thought of as a separate home, and so their square footage is counted in the density. It seems like right now, from what we understand about this ordinance, that would not be counted, and that would not be part of the density, basically calculation. And that is troublesome because what we know is that if there is ability to build out a property to, let's say, make a little bit of extra money by renting out that dwelling unit, maybe that is something that a landowner might be interested in doing, but that decreases the actual, the actual green space. It decreases the square footage of the homes available green space around it. So what we are worried about is kind of um, how they set those limitations and what the kind of requirements for, or what the cap is for, and if it will impact mandatory setbacks, if it will impact the zones that basically are between those dwelling units. Usually you have to have like 50 or 100 feet between them so they don't appear to be attached. We just don't know if that's really been thought about or thought about thoroughly in the impacts that it might broadly have. So yes, and I think there's a ton of new language about ADUs and it needs to be clarified. Um, and that's something that we are going to dive into this new version about.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because the other thing is we like to pay lip service to workforce housing, but at the end of the day, the intent of these homeowners is to probably rent them out short term, which
Hmm.
really is killing the rental market for anybody who wants to live here affordably.
Yeah.
So it's not honoring the value of allowing affordable housing. It's doing just the opposite.
Right. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would just want to bring up too, Gabby made a comment in the chat that we would be framing things, or it might be good to frame things as that when do we expect the commissioners to specifically address our concerns throughout this process? When is that going to be talked about? Because we keep seeing all these different versions, as we mentioned, without really understanding the reasoning behind why the changes were made, and also the reasoning behind when the version was released. Um, so we, as 100 Miles, who is very invested in this process, we didn't know a new version was coming out. We were
Mhm.
kind of shocked that a new version came out before the March 18th meeting, considering they had just released a version earlier in what was the last one? Cat, I'm blanking right now.
It was on
Um,
February 17th.
February 17th, yeah,
Mhm.
mid-February. So we weren't expecting this. So yeah, the timeline, how the timeline works with the versions, how those versions were made, and if they are specifically addressing input, and whose input are they addressing. Yeah. Awesome. Anyone else have any questions for us? Or if you want to walk through your comment, we can go back to the comment guidance worksheet. I will provide, like I said, as soon as we get out of this meeting, I'm going to provide a PDF and a writable version of that so that you can use it to kind of guide your comments for the 18th. But if anyone has any questions we can answer right now, we are happy to. Awesome. And again, I'm going to highlight that it is extremely effective to be able to reference that you have asked a question in the past and you have not had it answered. That's why the email tool is really important, because it asks a question to all the commissioners. At least one of them should be able to reply back on why this is specifically lined out in its language in the ordinance. If they can't answer that question, they should say, we can't answer that question right now, or let me get back to you. Usually that should be the commissioner that represents the area that you are living in. And that's why we have you include your address, so that they can know that you're one of their constituents. Well, if there's not any other questions, I'm going to double check the chat. I'm going to ask that Kat, I'm going to put Kat on the spot and ask that she tell us a little bit, just a little bit about some things that she might do to gain a little bit of confidence before she makes public comment, because she does it and has done it before the county commissioners.
Well, to gain confidence, I mean, I have my comments typed up, because thankfully I do have the space and time to do that because this is my job and I'm very thankful to that. So I always have my comments typed up. I practice them. I'll stand up at my desk and practice talking just to give me confidence. I've given a lot of talks and presentations. I mean, even talking to this screen right now, my palms are kind of sweaty. So it can be scary to, oh, thanks, Jazz. He says, great job. Thank you. Um, so it can be really scary to talk in front of a group of people, but that's what we have to just try to understand. Like, it's just people. It's just your regular person you'd see at the gas station, at the grocery store, and you're just talking to them about something that you care about. So I always like to think of my messaging too as like, I'm here to talk about what I care about. And that helps me feel more calm as well. But yeah, for me, it's practicing because that's my kind of, performance aspect. I view it as a performance. I also joke with my colleagues that I'm like, I need to give this county the best talent show they've ever seen when I go up to do a comment. Like maybe I'll save the day with a little, I need a cane and a top hat number. Um, but for y'all's comments, yeah, just go in confidently, have your thoughts typed up, just so you have something to refer back to can be nice when you're standing there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kat, and thank you all for joining us. I'm going to open up the floor to our last questions, comments. Hooray. I sometimes just like to give kudos to everyone for just coming on the call and joining us tonight, because that's a step, that's an advocacy step. That's a decision you've made. So thank you, thank you, thank
Can I
you.
ask one fun question? Sorry, I've been out
Yes,
of town. Has this been publicized in the Brunswick News at the 18th
not,
meeting?
yes,
Oh, it has?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
yes.
good.
Well, I think that they're required to, right?
No, I
Yeah.
mean an article. There probably is a
Oh, an
public
article.
notice that's,
No,
yeah,
no, there
okay.
is a public notice about it, but I don't know if there's been an article in.
Do you guys have any sway in that regard to
Good question. Good question.
Maybe
Okay.
you and Kat can talk offline about that.
Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds good. Okay, thanks. I'll see you on
You're very
Monday, Kat.
welcome.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Appreciate everyone from joining. Have a good rest of your Friday the 13th.